mixed family. That is, my mother is French from southern France, and my father was an American of Swiss. The name Schmitter is Alemannish, obviously. But he had returned to Switzerland, so I actually grew up when I was very young. My father worked for the League of Nations, so I grew up in a French, Swiss, American family, but a family also of Quakers who were very much oriented toward international organizations, peace, etc. The most important memory I have is my father always wanted to be a professor, but he started in the United States in the middle of the Depression, and the first thing he told me was, you can never be a professor because professors are not paid enough money to live on, which was true in the early 1930s in the United States. So that I remember. You can never be a professor. The other thing my father told me was that I had a very unusually, shall we say, high propensity to travel, to go and study in different places. And I had this image, and so did my father, that if you became a professor, you went to one place and you spent the rest of your life teaching in one university. So for those two reasons, no money and no travel, I never thought I would become a professor. Well, in part as a reaction to my having studied international relations in Geneva. So I did a degree at the university, at the Institut aux Études in Geneva, in international relations. And I found that so boring that I knew that I was not going to continue in droit international public, histoire diplomatique, économie internationale, I can't remember. They were all so boring. And but I was interested in politics, and Stanley Hoffman was a visiting professor for one semester at Geneva, and he's the one who convinced me not only that I should go back to the United States, he said I shouldn't stay in Switzerland, and he was right, but that I should study politics and that I should do it at Berkeley with Ernst Haas. You know, what would happen if the EU disappears? Right? So I'm willing, I think we should think about that. The first point is, if the EU disappears, Europe does not disappear. And then the question is, how transformed is Europe? Both because of the EU, but the whole post-war period, NATO, all sorts of other institutions, Council of Europe, Western European Union, Human Rights Court in Strasbourg, that's hundreds of European institutions who have no dependency or even relationship with the EU. So the EU goes away, but there's still a Europe and there's still a structured Europe. So I think the first thing is the EU could go away, but Europe would probably remain what Karl Deutsch would have called a pluralistic security community. That European countries would not go back to going to war or threatening each other with war. Maybe on the margins in the Balkans, perhaps, but elsewhere I think that's been acquired, and that's very important. So that's not contingent, I think, on the survival of the EU. But then there's a series of questions of how and what, under what context, because what will make I think what will happen probably is the EU will break up into maybe 3 EUs. There'll be a core EU of the original 6, maybe plus Spain, I don't know. Then there will be a northern periphery, which will be essentially part of a free trade area. And then there'll be the southern EU, which will have its own currency or devalue and simply withdraw, but stay within the broad parameters of the free trade area, currency, open currency exchange, having devalued, of course.